Thanks, Stephen, and good afternoon to your viewers at home. And thanks for the question. Indeed, it's not going to be a very straightforward answer around that particular question because we're dealing with an uncertainty. We're dealing with a pandemic that no one can predict. And of course, the dates have been set for the 25th of January for the public schools. And clearly, there were some of the private or independent schools that had planned to reopen on the 13th. We can see and hear that some of them are beginning to change those days to the 18th in response to the level 3 of the Disaster Management Act.
As you say, it's not going to be a straightforward answer. I mean, there are so many different factors to weigh up now. What are your members? I mean, I know you'll be speaking to them informally. You might be doing some surveys of your members. I mean, how are teachers feeling at the moment about going back to school?
Well, it's a mixed feelings. Some of them really very fearful of the rising numbers. Some of them enthusiastic to say, look, last year they were not able to cover the curriculum and therefore wanting to start the year early. We have had some of them wanting to start the early on the 18th of January to deal with the grade 12 because they feel that grade 11 were not adequately prepared for grade 12. So it comes from them. So it's different areas, different localities in terms of how they view and 2021 in the absence of the vaccine. So clearly it is going to be an issue where we have got to engage the government seriously on how we can approach the year on a flexible approach so that we are informed by the communities and the science that will then be defining what needs to be done at a particular point in time. So yeah, it's mixed reactions, mixed feelings. There are those that are saying we need to extend the reopening by a week or two to see that the numbers are really declining consecutively for about 14 days, then it can then give an assurance that when we reopen, we will not be increasing to the numbers.
There's obviously been a lot of research about how vulnerable people in different sectors are. And I mean, we're all vulnerable. I mean, unless you shut yourself in a room on your own, which I don't think anyone wants to do, and I don't think for mental health reasons you should do, we're all at risk. But how vulnerable are teachers? And the reason I ask you this now is that we have a lot more data than we did, say, 9 months ago. We now actually should be able to tell, for example, how vulnerable a teacher is compared to how vulnerable, say, a cashier is.
Yeah, you're right, Stephen. We have learned our lessons in 2020, and clearly we need to be able to answer that question by saying the teachers are more vulnerable given the fact that they bring more numbers at the same time, especially 2021, given the fact that the new, I don't know what they call it, but they say it's a variant. I have called it something else and I don't want to call it now. The new variant suggests that the young people are also affected and therefore it is more transmissible than the first variant that we have had in the past 9 months. And therefore that then brings into question how best we can be able to prevent these particular variants from devastating the teaching community. So yeah, they are more vulnerable. The other areas that really continue to be a problem that present this particular vulnerability for our teachers is the lack of psychosocial support, where we need to build resilience and support our teachers to be able to build resilience in our students. And that we have been able to see when we called a meeting of all the ministers in Africa in the future of teaching in the last 3 months, where they all acknowledge that they are struggling to provide psychosocial services, and therefore we need a synergized strategy between the social department as well as health, where we bring all the tools of health and expertise to be aligned the education strategies so that we're then able to deal with that. So yeah, we can, but it's from area to area. There are more areas that are more vulnerable and then other areas are not vulnerable given the distance that the learners are traveling, but also given the support that the parents are giving to their children coming to school in terms of making sure that the transport is safe, making sure that when they leave the school, they go back home, making sure that there's no access to drugs and many other things that really put the teachers in a situation of this particular vulnerability, both in terms of the spread of the disease, but also in terms of possible violence that we have seen in the previous years as a result of use of substance and other drugs.
Yeah, I mean, again, as I say, there's been so many more facts now than we had 9 months ago. And one of the facts is that we now know how vulnerable many learners are to dropping out if schools are closed for a long period. I don't have the numbers to hand, but we're worried about hundreds of thousands of young people. I mean, that adds more pressure on this debate, doesn't it? That if we close schools, if we don't open schools at the end of January, the longer it goes on, the higher number of young people won't finish school.
Yeah, it's a debate, Stephen, about the country's belief in education. Do we believe in education? Do we believe that education is one of the most important vehicle we can use for awareness building, for empowering our people to deal with the fear and the anxieties that they have? So if we believe in education, then brings the question of why would we not invest in more tools that can be given to the teachers? Why would we not invest in more social distancing so that we're then able to ensure that no learner has no access to education, but more learners are able to access education? One, it is that when we adopt this blended teaching in the form of saying 2 days the learners are at home, they need to be able to adopt to that particular routine. And when they're at home, what are they doing? So meaning that we need to be able to provide them with other means of education in the form of tools that they can be able to use when they're at home. So when they come back to school for 3 days, we know that the other 2 days they have not been sitting and not doing anything. And then so that they don't drop out on the basis that they feel that they attend the school once a week and therefore the other week they're not going to school. And that in itself is a social problem that we need to be able to address. And I believe that we have learned a lot, and therefore we need to be able to ramp up e-learning, online teaching, and many other things that we can do to ensure that when we adopt these particular rotational routines, learners are not left alone. They are with the teachers in one way or another. So we need to invest. And then when we saw the budget being cut in education, we began to ask ourselves questions. Do we believe in education in this country, that it plays a very important role in economic vitality? And if we don't give the skills and if we don't really prioritize education, prioritize the teachers, basically it is that we're going to have a longer recovery in terms of the economy. Because if the parents have got to go to work, they need their learners to be in school because the school is playing that particular role, not only of teaching, but of supporting the economy. So I believe that that is a debate that as the people of South Africa, we must agree that education is very important and we must prioritize their teachers in terms of vaccine, in terms of other tools and so on.
I mean, in the middle of all of this, I mean, we've got private schools, independent schools offering online-only options now for not a lot of money, I may say, some of the products that I've heard about. Government should be doing the same, shouldn't it? I mean, there should be a way to make sure that teachers who perhaps are more vulnerable to the disease are able to teach from home to learners who are also, for various reasons, stuck at home. Maybe it's safer to keep them at home. I mean, there's been quite a long period of time for government to try and do this.
Well, it's the question of political will, Stephen. You know, if things are going to be based on politics and wish list and wishful thinking by the politicians, nothing is going to be done. So you need what I call reckless leadership. Reckless leadership in the sense of saying, look, I'm a minister of education. I'm an MEC of education. I need the tools. I need the support for the teachers because I believe that this is the only way we are going to be able to defeat the fear, the anxiety, but also the disease itself if everybody takes responsibility. So you need that kind of a leadership that says we're going to invest billions into education now. Secondly, it is that it cannot be that we continue to be talking about data. We need to be able to say to government, you need to take a decision to ensure that every teacher, every learner in the country has got data for them to be able to learn. It can't be for the few and the haves who are going to be accessing quality education when the rest of the learners are not accessing quality education. It is doable. It is possible. It is only that there is no political will and from the top leadership of government, in particular from the Treasury, that continues to be undermining the possibility and the power of education by cutting the education budget when we're supposed to be providing that. So free data for the teachers to be able to send home lessons for the learners who are going to be attending as a result of rotational timetabling, and therefore when they come, they need to be able to say, we've done work and we've been in contact with our teacher. The technology is there. So I'm saying adopting blended learning is important, because obviously the teacher in front of the learner in a screen or in the classroom is still very, very critical, and we can do it. It's doable, but we need the society to stand up and be able to say to the politicians, science has proven to us that we can do it, and we have got to do it.
Magwena, you started off this conversation. I completely understand why by saying you weren't able to give me a hard and fast answer about whether you would support schools opening on the 27th of January. It's a very broad constituency in some ways which you represent. Are you able at this stage to tell me by when you think, not, I won't hold you to it, when you think you may be able to make a decision? And I say this because the National Coronavirus Command Council, government, the Basic Education Department, they're going to have to start looking at making a decision. It's the 9th of January now. The 27th is when schools open for children, 25th for your members. I would imagine they probably really need to make a decision in about 11 days' time. Will you be in a position to decide by then?
Yes, Stephen, we will be able to decide by then, because our National Executive Committee will have a meeting. We'll have got to assess all the facts that are there. As I'm saying, we have built resilience. We have got creativity that we have learned from our principals in the previous year, and we'll then be assessing the 14 non-negotiables that we have. What is in place? Are the PPEs in place? Are we able to see our sanitation being in place? Are we able to see water tanks in place, and all those particular things and so forth? We're also going to be observing how we are dealing with the numbers as they're rising. Are they going to be declining in the next 2-3 days? And if they're declining, that helps in making a definitive decision to then say, well, is the 25th the final day of reopening, or are we going to have only few grades that are able to reopen and therefore have a flexible approach to that? So yes, in 11 days time, we'll be able to make that particular decision, because we have not rested. We have been doing work, and we are confident that education is very important, and therefore we need to see to it that one way or another, we are able to make that decision.
Magwena Maluleke, I do appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed. The General Secretary of the South African Democratic Teachers Union, thank you for giving up time this Saturday afternoon to discuss this issue. Very, very important issue, perhaps one of the most important and complex governance issues of our times, education during a pandemic.